But I knew that when our ancestors came here, that it wasn't about the difference in their ethnic origins that was going to produce this vast variety of music that would come out as blues, Negro spirituals, merengue, calypso. There was this amazing thing happening on the planet. There was a renewal, there was a charge being given through these people. And we're not celebrating that. And that's what I find incredible. We have not celebrated the extraordinary thing they've done. Never heard of any other people that were in chains and that sang and that created as prolifically as they did, and that the world has not created anything else. They're still going back to those old blues and those old merengos and calypso and tapping into that to get new thing, because that's what it was. It was something to feed the world, to feed the soul of the world. And so in the environment that this music was created, if we would look at the word culture, to me could not suffice to explain what was happening here, because when we talk about culture, we're talking about almost something that is permanent, something that doesn't really change, and that from generation to generation we find the same kinds of lifestyles, that a people will live. And so we'll talk about those people in terms of being French. There's a common denominator. That's not what happened over here. What happened, and that's why the music cannot really be called indigenous. It's not indigenous. What they did was brilliant. They came over and they had the seeds of this music in them. And they were exposed to Europeans and they watched them. And they didn't shut down. What they did was they opened. And in that opening, they merged. They took from the Europeans and they put into it what they had of African. And so you get this mixture of the goatskin drum and the accordion, the concertina, that's purely European. And then because they were in contact with them, we danced the round dance, we danced the waltz, we danced the heel and toe polka. These are all European dances. But they Africanized it. And it gave it a special rhythm that we now call rake and strike, which is basically at the root is called gombe. This is what George Moxey said. It's our gombe music. That is our beat here in the Bahamas. So I imagine that we could say that wherever these slaves were settled, it was very much not, again, their ethnic differences that determined the kinds of music they produced, but it was the environment. It was the soil, the sun, the nature, whether it was altitude, whether it was flat, islands, and so on and so forth, and there's going to be some sort of amazing chemistry, alchemy that's going to take place, and they produce, my God, and I say they were singing to survive. People get depressed and commit suicide today. Well, look at what they did. And I think that if we would pass that on, that we would have a lot to celebrate, and we could perhaps face modern times in a more balanced way. Mm-hmm. And so I created it seemed to me that Cat Island would be the natural soil where I would want to plant this camp, because it's where, even though the music was played all through the Caribbean and all over the Bahamas, when I say the Caribbean, no, what I'm saying is that Turks and Caicos, they have a version that they call ripsaw. They use the same instrument, but they focus more on the saw, and they call it ripsaw music. Here in the Bahamas, they say that Charles Carter coined the phrase, you're raking and you're scraping on this thing, and so it became rake and scrape. And it needs the concertina, and it needs that goatskin drum. And of course, the carpenter saw, again, our ancestors were ingenious, so they couldn't have instruments. Well, you know what? They took what was around them, mm-hmm. and they turned it into music. So I think there's a lot to draw on, so much. And they, the things that amazed me was that there seems to be a natural, innate propensity for creating this music. And it was African, and it was the African blacks that were passing this music on. And I think that when we stopped celebrating that blackness, when we started considering it dark, or we considered it that it was inferior, we started to lose touch with the real music. And we also lost touch with the capacity to produce instinctive artists like Joseph Spence, Amos Ferguson, and so on and so forth. And I'm hoping with the camp that we can open those channels and allow a generation of new musicians to come forward. And it is mutant music. The Bahamas, and like everywhere, is very concerned about preserving our music, but the music that they did was because they were encountering other music. And so if that's the dynamic, then that's the dynamic. And so if we want new music, then we need to create the conditions under which those music would do. We can't go back and revive our wakes, and we can't go back and have the settlements be the way they are, but we can allow the children a space that they never had before in our culture by giving them a creative space and letting the magic of what happened inside our ancestors happen in them. And so the children aren't learning to read music. That is a choice, because what is important is for them to be possessed in the real sense that the music reveals itself to them in very much the same way that it would have revealed itself to our ancestors. That's what happened to me. I'm an instinctive artist. I didn't go to school, I didn't learn. It just hit me one day when I had the blues in Paris. So I know what it is, and I know that it's important. If we want to have a dynamic, healthy society, then we must bring forward that ancestral history, because it's where we draw from. And so Esther tonight is one of those little children. She's the youngest. And what has been amazing is when these children come, is to see what happens. And Esther's mom will say, child doesn't put the accordion down. She never puts it down. On Cat Island, PC and Kente that started with me are playing incredibly well. And same thing, 1 o'clock in the morning, we can't get them to go to bed. They won't put the accordion down. And so what's happening is that dynamic that I prayed for is taking place, and they need to be left alone. Leave them alone. Children have the intelligence. And if we let them become receptors, then they become real, true, they can become vehicles for this music. And so Esther is going to play a few songs for you. And Esther was the youngest. And this instrument is not easy to play. Believe me. First of all, look at how small she is. Okay? And then you have to get it, and then you have to practice. As their first maestro said, it has to become your best friend. And I'm just amazed. I think we need to celebrate these children for what they're doing. And of course they do better in school, and of course they're more balanced, and of course because it's what it's for. It's for bringing all those things out in us. So Esther, you'll come. You need a chair?
I'll bring a chair.
Let me introduce. Come, Esther. You want to say something? No.
Yes, music speaks.
No. I don't think so. I think you'll be able to hear her play. If not, Now, I did something. I decided that I can tell you about these musicians, and I can tell you that people like Opie and Frank Williams and Pompey and Thomas Cartwright and all these musicians that played the accordion, they didn't have access to this instrument. Children were not allowed to touch this instrument, and you can guess why. It's fragile. And it was an adult thing. So how did it go? What do you think? Let me throw it out to you. How on earth has it survived? What happened? If the children couldn't touch it.
They stole it.
Innate ability.
Excuse me?
Innate ability
What does that mean?
means it's inside you from birth.
But they still would need the instrument.
They stole that, man, when the parents weren't looking.
Exactly.
Of course.
They became experts at being, but what they had to do was sit, watch, get that on there, and then try to can you imagine what a fabulous, what a fabulous thing for a child to do. This is every teacher's dream, for children to have this thing that motivates them to discover. Well, they did it. And Ophi said that he was, 4 or 5 years old. He said, well, the Webb family is from Cat Island, and they are well known for being a musical family. And of course, Danny Johnson is here tonight, so from Cat Island, he can tell you more than I can, undoubtedly. But Ophi says he was about 4 or 5 years old when he just wanted to play, and he couldn't touch that instrument except when his father was present, and then he would allow him to touch it. But what happened was that these instruments, when they fell into, when the buttons sink in, they couldn't play them anymore. So he said every time family would come that were working on the project, every time they would come back to the Bahamas, they would bring a new accordion. And the old one was in the house for him. And all the buttons were sung out. The thing couldn't play, and yet that became his instrument. Okay? That became his instrument. So just imagine what these children are doing. All right? That they don't even have what Esther has. And he said he was about 6 when this gentleman came by, and he gave me the gentleman's name, but I'd have to read my paper to remember. And what was important for him was that gentleman said to him, this gentleman was a very, was a musician. He could write music and read music, a Bahamian, and he'd come to Cat Island and he saw little Ophi fiddling around on this broken accordion, and he asked him to play him a song, and he said he played something, and he knew it wasn't great, but the guy said to him, that is fantastic, continue. And he said it was the thing that remained in his mind, that became a driving thing, and he did. And today he's Ophi. He's one of our most famous accordionists in the Bahamas, and thanks to him and others, the tradition is still here. And so I thought that to allow these children to be in that kind of space, the classes would be total immersion in French. I brought in the expertise of French accordionists because I wanted them, I felt like the music has to go beyond the frontiers of the Bahamas. The way we play in the Bahamas is only with the right hand. Anywhere else in the world they use the right and the left because the left hand plays a rhythm there. And so I wanted this new generation to have all of that so that when they take this music, the traditional Reiki, it's going to blow people's minds. I know it is. But at the same time, they'll show that they master the instrument, that choice is a choice. It's a cultural choice. And so it's important in the camp as we tell the stories of these musicians. We're not competing with our ancestors. We're walking in their footsteps. And so for me, it's important that these ancestors come to the camp, that they see the children, that they interact with the children, and they validate what's going on here.